Again, my name is Sue Galsey. I'm the Chief Program Officer at JCC Association. Thank you for taking some time out of our new crazy days to spend some time with us and with each other relative to security, which of course will be a different kind of security discussion than we've had typically. I'm really pleased that we have two of our partners from SCN here with us today, Mark Giardina and Robert Graves. I'll introduce them in just a minute. Craig Salgado, who is the COO of the JCC of San Francisco, was also going to be a panelist today. He needed to attend to some things at his agency, so he won't be joining us on the call, but we'll look for his input in future correspondence or in a future call. So as I said, just as far as some logistics, so everyone is muted right now. And if you could keep yourself muted, you do have the ability to unmute yourself, but if you could please keep yourself muted so that we don't all get entertained by the children in your home or the dogs or whatever might be factored into your own work environment now. And if you can, any questions that you have for either Mark or Robert, if you could put into the chat room directed to my attention. You don't have to put it to all. After they speak, I'll go ahead and field them the questions. And then depending on how much time we have, we could open it up for discussion amongst and between you all as a group. So assuming there's no questions, I'm going to just dive in. I'll introduce both Mark and Robert together and then let them pivot between each other. Mark Giardina is the Assistant Deputy Director of SCN Secure Community Network, which I think you all know is our partner for the entire Jewish community on security. He's been in the intelligence industry for over 20 years, previously worked for the State Department, and is a specialist on global security and risk management. And Robert Graves is the Regional Security Advisor for the National Capital Region, which is DC, Maryland, and Northern Virginia, and has previously worked in counterintelligence, law enforcement, and cybersecurity. So I think we've pretty well established they know a whole lot more than I do. So I am going to turn it over to Mark to kick us off. I think I unmuted you. There you go.
Am I muted again? No.
No, you're good.
Thank you guys for taking the time, and great to be a part of this. So if at any point in time, like Sue had said, if you have any specific questions about what I'm going to be covering, I'm going to be covering specifically the physical security aspect and a little bit of some of the emergency planning, some of the risk management stuff. And then I will pass it over to Robert. I'll give a little bit of time in between. If there's any questions on mine, I'll pass over to Robert. He'll be covering some of the cyber approach and some of the other things that we've seen. I don't think we'll have an issue here based on the small group and the fact that you guys are doing it right and sent out registrations for this. But just to cover it in advance is a little bit of a safety brief. In case we do get interrupted somehow in some way, shape, or form because somebody got a hold of the link, we have seen Zoom bombing, which Robert will talk a little bit more in depth about. Obviously some of the white supremacists and some of the bad guys out there are getting a little bit bored at home, so they're figuring out how to disrupt the Jewish community, and they're doing so by infiltrating Zoom calls with anti-Semitic speech and hate speech and all kinds of other creative ways that they found to do this. If that happens here, I will quickly ping over to Sue. We will end this call and we will reconvene as to not give them the platform to be able to do this. And then we'll handle from there by reaching out to Zoom, potentially tracing these guys and hopefully having somebody knock on their door. With that, I will start with just some of the physical security elements. And I have to say hi to my buddy, Laura. Haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you again. Some of the physical security elements, understanding that this group, and Sue, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that this group, there's some facilities directors, there's some people that work within security that are security professionals, and there's also others that have been just given the portfolio. So if I'm speaking across that range and some of you already know some of this or have different approaches to how you're handling some of these things, by all means, feel free to chime in. And share some of those innovative ways that you've accomplished some of these tasks. Um, Sue, has everyone been sent the one pager that we did on facility closures? So everyone has that?
Yeah, I sent that out in our listserv, so hopefully everyone received that last week.
Fantastic. So I'm not going to go too deep into that, but I want to talk about some of the things that we are seeing across the nation right now. Some of the things we have seen is as people go to check out their facilities, we've seen some anti-Semitic graffiti. We've seen some damage, some due to, obviously, white supremacists and anti-Semites, but also some that's financially motivated opportunistic crime. While for the most part, lives aren't in danger from this, uh, some of the ways to mitigate this or at least catch it in advance is others are not checking their cameras. So they have remote ability to check their cameras, so they're not checking their cameras at night. So one of the things that we ultimately suggest is, look, do a review of your cameras once a day, even if it's fast forward, swing through it, see who was there, do a record on vehicles in your parking lot, even if you can't see the plates, how many vehicles were in your parking lot at the time. And then day by day compare that. If you see new vehicles pop up, depending on where they're located, where they're parked, are they in a shadowy part of the parking lot where it looks like someone's just storing their car? Or is this a new vehicle that's popped up and is there for an hour a day and where they're located in relation to your facility? In addition to that, and I know this is going to vary state by state based on what we're seeing in Jersey right now, where law enforcement is actually looking at citations and potentially pulling people over to get them off the roads and out for moving in the community. But if you live in one of those counties or states where you're still allowed to move relatively freely to and from your facility, one of the things that we've seen really effective is creating a duty officer program within your staff so that someone is going and checking your facility. Now, when they check your facility, one of the vital things is not that they're just out there walking around the outskirts of your facility, checking doors, making sure things aren't damaged, but it's also taking a record of what they've seen and having a running diary that the person the next day or whomever else might go out can take a look at that and see what has been done, what cars were here, if there was glass broken, if there was something damaged, if the door was unlocked, so that they can reference that other day. And then be able to make decisions or phone calls or notifications accordingly. We've seen a couple of instances where someone has gone out to a facility and noticed some glass broken on the ground, didn't record it. The very next day, someone went out, saw that same glass broken, called the police, thought that somebody was throwing bottles at the facility. Turns out it had been there for a week and nobody had communicated across the board. So in addition to checking your facilities, it's super important to record the information that you're seeing for reference for anybody else. A couple of the other items, obviously, checking your intrusion alarms. If you have intrusion alarms at your facilities, any alarms that you have armed or are monitoring. One of the pitfalls that we've seen is the call list on those. Usually people will have, ADT or any one of these other alarm monitoring services. They put them into play, they arm them, the facility's closed, they're gone. But what they didn't realize is that the call list that your third-party monitoring firm had old numbers from people that no longer work at the JCC. So when they make that first notification, no one's actually getting it. And the police are usually the third or fourth person down on that list. And so they're not even getting to the police because they're not getting the authorization from anybody up there. So update those contact lists, make sure your third-party monitoring firms know who to call and in what order. It is up to you in what order you want them to call. I recommend having police first so the police can go out and at least check the facility and have one of you be the second person on the call list. Couple of other proactive safety measures, and based on nothing, we haven't seen this, but we have, obviously most of us have heard it, of potential, white nationalists, white supremacists, bad guys going around and spitting on door handles if they already have COVID-19, things like that. So if you do go check your facility, obviously look, just opening a door, even if you have touched that door handle, that's not going to hurt you. Wear gloves if you have it. If you don't have gloves, as soon as you go in, wash your hands if you're touching any windows, door handles, things like that. As the facility, if it is closed and hasn't been monitored, we want to make sure you take the necessary precautions from there. And just make sure while you're checking the security of your facility. And then just kind of the last measure that I want to cover before kicking it over to Robert and taking a couple of questions as well, is rechecking your ability to receive and transmit any emergency messages, right? So we're taking in a lot of information right now. You guys are great on sharing information amongst yourselves, But if you need to get that ability or get those messages out to the rest of your staff, how is that going to happen? The majority of you probably don't have mass communication ability, but maybe just a phone tree, something that you can put together now to be able to get information out to everybody. You know, again, if someone goes up and paints a swastika on a JCC right now, while the facilities are closed, it's not life-threatening, but it is way of life-threatening, and it is emotionally threatening. And so if this is something that's seen, we want to make sure we get the information out to the right people and how it's being handled, so that can spread across, because your community, as we all know, the Jewish community loves to communicate. And we will find out that a swastika was painted, and that by the time that message gets all the way out to the end, if we're not controlling that messaging, it will be Nazis fell from the sky with cans of spray paint. So we want to make sure we control the information by being able to accurately spread that to our organizations and to others that are involved. And then just a final note as far as planning goes, look, when your doors reopen, when we pass this, when we get through this, you should start thinking about recovery now. How are you going to open those doors? How are you going to bring people back? Staff-wise, right? Before you open the doors for the community, how are you going to open it for staff? Are you going to layer people back in? Even when we get through this and we get through to normal business, COVID-19 isn't going to have gone away. It's still going to exist. People are still going to be able to catch it. And we want to make sure that we have the new protocols and new living style, new arrangement for how we go back to business, because it will not be business as usual. So these plans, templates for these things, building these things now and really discussing them, you know, and getting something on paper will save you hours and days of heartache and potential, you know, having to reclose your doors after you reopen because you didn't do it the right way the first time, and something, you know, there was a negative occurrence because of that. So these are things to start thinking about now. I just kind of wanted to throw a few things out there that were on the one pager that we sent out as far as facility closures. But, you know, because of the small group, we can dive down a rabbit hole here a little bit. If there are any specific questions, specific issues you're facing, anything that we can help provide some expertise on before I kick it over to Robert for cyber. Or Sue, do you want Robert to go, and then we can just field all the questions?
Yeah, why don't we do that? Why don't we let Robert go, and then we'll open it up to everybody.
Great. Robert, on to you, sir.
Thank you, Mark. This is definitely going to be a challenging time for all of us, as more of us are working from home, working remotely. Basic cyber hygiene is all the more important, because that's how we're going to stay safe in this domain as well as our physical domains. It's key to think of our cyber activities as just like our physical activities. Just as we lock our front door, we need to take care and lock our front door, so to speak, of our online accounts, our platforms, our shared sites, and be cognizant of how we're doing these things. Working at home, some people may be on a bring your own device program. Some people may have dedicated work devices. They should be reminded to segregate those devices as much as possible. You know, we don't want our kids using our work device and going on various sites they may have access to, or may cruise during the day, and potentially expose that device to compromise from malware on any number of advertising sites as well. Our emails, again, we should always remind people, keep your passwords protected, use strong passwords, be skeptical of emails from sources you don't know. That's how the phishing scams usually begin. They oftentimes, though they will look on the surface very much like an ordinary email, we've recently seen campaigns targeting houses of worship broadly in a fraud scheme that appeared to come from the rabbi or the clergy of that house of worship. And in fact, it's a spoofed email address. It's not a real email address. So we should always take a moment to carefully consider emails and see if there's anything out of the ordinary with them. And again, be skeptical of things that don't seem right. Don't click through links in emails, especially from sources you don't know. Because these are often can be malicious. It's worthwhile to take that moment to hover your cursor over the link and see where it really goes, and see if it's legitimately the place you think you're trying to get to with clicking through that link. Same thing with attachments. More and more scam artists are using Dropbox and Google Doc and Yahoo Docs as the payload delivery, if you will, for their malicious software. Again, don't open documents from file share services that aren't familiar to you, that aren't your own. These are some very basic best practices. On a more macro level, it's good to check in with your IT team. Find out when was the last time you did a security audit or penetration test on your system. Are they checking the settings on a regular basis? Oftentimes, online security systems are set up and nobody comes back and checks that the switches haven't defaulted to the manufacturers or the original settings with this software update. The vendor pushes out a new software package, takes everything back to vendor settings. It may not be the right settings. So just ask your IT team, when was the last time they checked the security settings to make sure that those controls were in place as they should be. Mark talked a little bit about the Zoom bombing. We're seeing more and more of this as we're more and more using teleconferencing platforms like this. Bad actors of one kind or another, malicious, harassing, anti-Semitic, or white nationalist types are crashing our Zoom rooms, whether it's Zoom or Microsoft Teams or GoToWebinar or whatever platform we're using. It's important to know the tools that are available to you on that platform. With a platform like this meeting is moderated. The moderator can control what can be seen and what can be said, who can talk and when. We all had to register and got a unique login to get into the room. These are all useful ways to validate and verify who's taking part in your conference. To the extent possible, share the meeting announcements only to trusted list, contact list and mailing list. By and large, we want to avoid posting the meeting information, the links on social media or public websites, because that pretty much opens our front door to the public at large for whomever chooses to wander into them. There are times when it's appropriate to do that, but in those cases, look at other tools. Again, the moderator can control the microphones, can control the cameras and prevent file sharing or screen sharing as well. So be familiar with those tools. If you're not familiar with the platform you're using or not sure, then again, get with your IT team. They should be able to educate you on the tools available. Zoom on their web page has a good blog where they have a running list of security tools. We've included that in our emails out to our community as well, the links to that website. But whether it's Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whichever one, just be familiar with the tools at hand for you. If there's first to keep abreast of ongoing scams, ftc.gov, the Federal Trade Commission, on their consumer page publishes a running list of ongoing scams that they're aware of. You'll see public service announcements from the FBI and other entities as well posted there to keep yourself alert of the scams, and you can make your community, your staff, your team aware of those as well. If you have an incident, it's very important to report it. If it is criminal or any online incident that potentially is criminal, whether it's hate crime or fraud, you can report to the FBI at ic3.gov. That's the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center. They'll take internet crime complaints right there. If it's a suspected anti-Semitic act, you want to also report it to the ADL through their incident management system, incident reporting system. And of course, we would like to know it at a secure community network as well, so we can track them internally ourselves and help you run down the incident and prevent it from happening again if at all possible. I know I've hit a lot really fast there, but I didn't want to take up too much time. I want to leave plenty of time for questions. So I'm going to kick it back.
Great. Thank you both, Mark and Robert. So given the size of the group, I'm very comfortable opening it up to having you unmute yourself if you have a question. And the questions could be for Mark or Robert or truly for each other. If you want to know about how other people are handling situations or planning for something as we go forward.
I just want to reiterate something that Robert had said a bit ago. Look, if something pops up, obviously, you can call your local law enforcement if you have a question or you need response or something like that. But if something does pop up and you're unsure or you want to be able to vet it or you want to be able to talk about it, for those of you, and I'm pretty sure everybody here knows, but our duty desk, our Intel desk, SCN's desk, it runs 24/7. Someone will always pick up the phone if you call. I think it's 844 SCN desk is the number, and you can find it on our website as well. So that's a number you can pick up the phone. You'll get one of us. Ask any question you want. You can send an email. If you send an email, it'll likely be checked first thing in the morning. But if you need an answer, I don't care if it's 2 a.m., somebody will answer the phone. And that's on cyber stuff too. Or if you just want to call me because you want to tell me a bad joke. Laura does it all the time. She wakes me up at like 2 a.m., tells me a bad joke.
I have a question.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Wendy. I'm the security director up in Providence, Rhode Island. So we have a functional federation, JCC Federation in one, and I work with all of our synagogues in the state. With these white nationalists, threatening to spit on Jews and police and different things happening, do you foresee when we reopen, I look at this as they have too much time they had too much time on their hands already. Now they really have too much time on their hands. And when it comes to high holy days and stuff, having to amp up even more. Is there anything, do you have any evidence that that's possible, or are you thinking about that?
So it's a brilliant question because we monitor, social media, we monitor chats, we monitor all of those websites as much as possible. We also liaise with, the FBI, DHS to be able to look at, if there's an increase in chatter, if there's an increase in activity. I think the best way to address it for now, because between now and whenever that day comes, we don't know how long that powder keg is going to build. But the best way to really address it for now is, a lot of organizations, a lot of JCCs have have had to lay off or stop, local security, armed security, unarmed security, that physical presence. And because of financial restrictions and things like that, what we're anticipating is a lot of organizations are going to go back to open their doors, but they're not going to restart that profile right away, mainly because of those financial constraints. And what we've seen in the past when things like this happen is what those would-be bad actors do is exploit that opening, because you had something that was once a kind of hardened target, or at least harder than the one next to it, is now a softer target. And they're saying, oh, well, JCC's back open, but there's no security. There's nobody out front. There's no police vehicle. There's no whatever that may be. So even opening up with a harder approach or a harder profile than you had before, and then softening it up is part of what we're recommending to a lot of organizations. But again, that powder keg might have 2 months to build, or maybe next week, not that this will happen, but maybe next week, all of a sudden, there's a cure or there's a treatment and we can go from there. But a lot of that's going to have to be answered the closer we get to opening those businesses. We will, however, look, the threat is out there. It's been communicated, putting spit in spray bottles and spraying down door handles and windows and things like that. I don't imagine that threat is going to go away, that passive type of threat that they can get away with without having to physically interact with anybody, to be able to get away with in the shadows of night and things like that. So I don't imagine that will go away, and I imagine it will be a tactic going forward. But it's something that we continue to monitor and the threat levels of that. Robert, I don't know if I know you've experienced a couple of things locally in the NCR. Have you seen an increase in chatter or anything like that locally?
We've touched base with our local police liaisons of the FBI. Nothing remarkable, nothing specific to the local area here. We did have a vandalism incident. It seems to be as much of at this stage, it seems to be as much of a crime of opportunity as anything else, but that's still under investigation, remains to be seen. Down the road, we expect, as Mark said, we're going to have to, part of the reconstitution recovery phase of all this, we're going to have to really deliberately look with our around the community about how to spin up security as part of spinning the organization back up. In terms of what's possible, virtually anything is possible. But we want to spend a little more time as we get closer looking at what is actually going on and taking some prudent measures. We expect that we will have to dial up our security level a bit when we return to normal operations, just as a measure of prudence until we get a better handle on what's going on in the area. And we'll kind of take it step by step then.
Thank you.
Thanks. And Wendy, thanks for introducing yourself. And if we could all follow suit, that would be great. Great opportunity to get to know each other also, your name and where you're from. no questions. I don't want to force there to be a question, so I'm not gonna.
I'll ask one. I'll ask
I
one.
just can't imagine there aren't any, but okay, thanks, David.
Sure. David Mitnick from the JCCs of Greater Baltimore. Just curious what people are doing with Prox card access for employees that have been furloughed or laid off with the hope that they're coming back. Getting some pushback. Some people don't want us to start deactivating those, but I'm feeling very strongly that we should be. Just curious what people are thinking.
So Robert, I'll let you chime in on this one here in a little for a second too. But look, just as an access control best practice when it comes to facility closures for this, for those that have been furloughed, for those that have been let go, laid off, anything like that, I know that there's obviously going to be some emotional and political and physical, or not physical, but emotional and political pushback on, well, we might bring them back and we don't want to, we don't want to send that message. I can't stress enough, just from a basic access control practice, if someone's furloughed and they no longer work for the organization and they no longer should have access, that access needs to be revoked. And for that matter, I've talked to a couple of JCCs that have actually turned off all of their member access too, just for basic members. Maybe, they're not deleting it, they're just turning it off, making sure no one has access to the facility besides the people that are supposed to. And then taking the people that are supposed to have access to the facility, whether it's a 5-person crew, communicating those names and information to law enforcement. So law enforcement knows, including license plates. So law enforcement knows what cars should be in the parking lot and how many people are allowed in that building at any given time. I can't stress it enough. And one of those reasons is I've seen other JCCs, in the past I've seen, and this is something that just recently happened with one of the YMCAs that I'm aware of, is they didn't remove the access and people started going in after hours that had that after hours access, using the gym, touching, gym equipment, things like that, and not wiping it down. It wasn't sanitary, even after cleaning crews had been through. So I can't stress enough. If there's 5 people allowed access to the facility, there should only be 5 people, and I would highly recommend communicating that to law enforcement. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Robert.
I would concur with Mark's notes. When people are furloughed or the facility shut down, it's probably a good idea. It is a good idea to just suspend access. Down the road, as you start looking at what personnel you'll bring back, if there's some personnel who are permanently let go because you had to lay off or reduce staff, or if you have some personnel who've decided they don't want to come back, either way, you look at potentially disgruntled former employees. You should be very deliberate about that, do a risk assessment in each case, and a risk management plan for each individual case. Something you should think about in your recovery and reconstitution planning as you move forward.
So I'm just going to comment. I don't know if everyone's seeing the chat, but 3 people chimed in that they actually removed access for all staff when they closed the building. So separate from who's furloughed or not, almost all staff, with the, it looks like exception of facilities team and some executive staff, it seems like that seems to be the universal practice there. So I encourage you to look at the chat yourself to see a few other people's comments there.
And not for nothing, but something that a lot of organizations forget is, if you employ Securitas or, Garda, Whack and Hut type staff, unarmed security, without speaking ill of anyone or grouping anyone together, Securitas, these organizations, sometimes, you're talking about a $10 an hour security guard. And a lot of organizations will make the mistake of not turning off their access after they've dropped them off. And when you have a $10 an hour security guard, and a lot of people are cutting security, and they're looking for a home, they're looking for a place, if they still have access, they would easily exploit that. I've seen it time and time again. So it's not just members, it's not just staff, it's also, contractors, cleaners, if you're not using them anymore, any type of other staff that might have had access at one point. And it's a great opportunity to also review your entire access card, access control list and say, all right, well, look, let's, at the very least, let's wipe this down and say, okay, Maybe there's some other members on there that have since quit. Maybe there's people that have lost badges. Maybe there's duplicate badges. There's an opportunity to clean it up as well.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, David, for that question.
Let me ask a question just to see if anybody has any interest in this. How are you guys sitting right now for organizationally, your organizational crisis plans? Do you have them? Do you need them? Do you need templates? Is this an opportunity for you to develop them? You know, is this anything that we can help? We're developing a template right now for EOPs, emergency operations plans, things like that. You know, we've tried to stress to organizations, look, while everyone's working remotely, this is the time to, you know, get things on paper and start putting these things down on paper. How do you guys sit for templates and information like this? Is this something you need? Is this something we can help with?
Jess Roman from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I think that anything we can see in addition to what we have is helpful. I think, like, for us, we have a pretty decent basis, but you know, there's always that piece we miss. So I think that seeing somebody else's and seeing what you put out would be great for me.
So I would also encourage all of you, and I will thank you for that. And what I'll do is I'll get our template together and I'll send that. And it's just a blank template. You can kind of look at it. If you're missing pieces on there, you can add those pieces into your own. But I would also encourage all of you to share each other's plans with each other so that you guys can see them, see what you're all addressing. You know, one of the things we'd like to get in the eventual future is some type of EOP crisis plan template standard across the board for all JCCs. And so we know everybody's hitting the right buttons and taking care of the right things, at least from a category perspective. So I would encourage you guys to start sharing that with each other.
So if you want to share those, you could send them to me and we could get them all uploaded onto jcca.me and we could direct you to where those will be living on that website.
And I'll send you a shell template as well that people can reference.
Right. The shell template I'll send back out to you all. The rest we'll leave up on the website. Yeah, Laura.
Mark, this is Laura Katz from the Poses JCC in Fairfax, Virginia. I haven't actually asked Robert for this yet. It was on my to-do list, so apologies, Robert. I'm not jumping chain. What would be helpful is some advice from experts on the true applicability of screening measures once people start coming back in the building, namely technology solutions. And I've seen a variety of information out there that a lot of the screening measures are really feel-good measures and don't truly work, but they're very popular and very now. And I want to make sure that I can give my exec team, who is on a limited budget, real sound advice, whether or not that's a good solution or not, and what types of things to look for if we do go down that path. Everything from infrared thermometers, which I hear are notoriously not accurate, to infrared cameras that are being used in airports. What are some of the pitfalls that we could fall into if we go down that road? Those types of things would be very helpful, because I just don't have the bandwidth or the contacts to make that determination.
No, so go ahead, Robert.
I just want to jump in here. I am daily deluged with vendors of one kind or another, some of them friends, trying to sell gear for this very purpose. I think it's way early to even be looking at that until we have CDC or NIH guidance on what we should be looking at to screen people coming back in. It's kind of hard to even discuss the applicability of any technical solution or the effectiveness of any technical solution. I appreciate people wanting to look at it, but it may be, we're just going to have to let this situation develop a little bit longer and tell them, maybe start a drop file for all those emails coming in with the latest and greatest infrared sensor that's going to tell you if somebody has a fever or what they had for lunch or whatever it is. But it's way too early for that stuff.
I think just to add to that, I think one of the things you can prep now that is on, and I'll send you guys a link. I mean, it's easy to find right now on CDC website and a couple others, but is that screening questionnaire. You know, we take for granted that everyone has read all the information on what are the signs of COVID-19, what are the symptoms and all those things. There are a lot of people that haven't read it. There are a lot of people that are ignoring it, thinking it's nothing. So having that screening questionnaire, when's the last time you checked your temperature? Have you had a cough lately? All of those other things that show symptoms, to actually walk them through the questionnaire, that could potentially be just one method of screening, because next thing you know, they say yes to something. But more than that is also, before you open back up, and this is what we talk about on the reconstitution and the recovery plans, is establishing organization by organization, what is your tolerance level? What's your risk tolerance? You know, if you have that questionnaire and somebody answers yes to one, is that going to be enough for you to say, all right, look, we need you to go home and come back when you can answer no to all these questions? Or is it 2 out of 3, 3 out of 3? What is your risk tolerance? How are you going to introduce that back into your organizations? So it's you know, thinking about those things and the screening tactics from a questionnaire standpoint, but also measuring that against what's your risk tolerance when opening those doors back up, and having your finger on the pulse for all the executive directors on what, because I promise you, when you ask that question and everyone's in the room and, hey, what's our risk tolerance for, you know, for opening this back up, you're going to have someone that's going to go, it's fine, it's just a bad cold, all the way to somebody else that's going to be like, you know, if they look funny, I'm not going to let them back in. To Laura, the only thing I would say is, you know, just make sure you don't take the Jewish grandmother approach and just put your hand on people's foreheads. It's just the one thing I'd stay away from. That was a joke. My grandmother used to do the same thing all the time. She had no idea what my temperature was.
Well, our biggest fear, my biggest fear is using temperature as the only guidance, because we know somebody who has a son who has it, who is tested positive and showing absolutely no symptoms. Not a fever, not a sniffle to be had. And so I'm worried that everybody's focused on that and going to spend too much money on that as the panacea. And I just want to make sure that we're thoughtful in how we go about opening back up and what advice we're giving.
And that goes back.
I'm going to hear from the members more than anybody else.
And that, Laura, that goes back to my recommendation. Let's wait till we get some good guidance out of CDC, NIH, WHO about how to screen people to let them back into our offices and workplaces.
Anything else that people want to ask each other while you have this opportunity?
I have one more question, actually, if no one else does. I was going to use this opportunity, possibly, this is for Mark and Robert, this might not be the appropriate place, to have some of my staff, if SCN is able to help train us again on MIR 3. Is that a possibility if I reach out to the duty desk? Because I have some staff that wasn't here when we launched it, who are now in positions that they might be the ones sending the message if there was a problem. I'd love to get them trained.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a refresher.
My colleague Evan Keats runs that program for us.
Okay.
If you'd like to email him directly, you can. But yeah, if you want to send me an email, I'll hook you up with Evan, because I can do a refresher training as well. If he's
Great. Okay, thank you.
MIR 3 is the communication tool that SCN uses, and it's also the one that JCC Association is now using, that hopefully you've all sent us your information and you're part of it. Some people use that as their mass communication tool within their center. All right. Do a countdown now. You've got the 5-second warning if there's any more questions. 5. All right, you can count yourself. If there are any other questions, thankfully, our friends at SCN are incredible partners and so generous with their time. So if you have any questions, feel free to send them to me. I'll get them to Mark and Robert, and we'll get you answers. We'll also get you all the documents and references that Mark and Robert had made here, and we'll continue to communicate. And also, if there is an interest in a topic or just even small group discussions, I'm happy to regather this group. But I also recognize most of you, if not all of you, have other jobs at your center, and you're probably participating in other cohort calls as well. So I want to be responsive and available to what your needs are, but it'll be helpful for you helpful to me if you could communicate those to me. ideas for panelists or discussion topics, and then I'll be happy to regather the group. All right, so thank you all for spending some time with us. Big thank you to Robert and Mark. Very informative, super helpful. I learned a lot. Good luck, you all, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks. Wendy, shoot me an email. I'll link you up with Evan.
Thank you so much.